Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I'm a detransition male, and today I'm going to be reacting to Ari Drennen's TikTok on whether or not biological sex is binary or not. So let's get into it.
Is biological sex binary? Hey everybody, I'm Ari Drennen. I'm a journalist and a trans woman, and I'm tackling the questions about trans people that you're afraid to ask. And today we're talking about the binary, where the answer is, like most things, it's really complicated. Biological sex is role dependent throughout nature and describes a series of non linked traits. There's actually not any single characteristic that can determine whether a person is male or female.
So this is completely false. So this paper that she cites here, multimodal models of animal sex. So this research that she cites, it originally stems from undergraduate research. It is a undergraduate research project that then got published under the supervision of the professors. But ultimately, this is undergraduate research. So she's citing an undergraduate research opinion piece that essentially the only empirical work done in this paper, other than a undergraduate literature review, is a meta-analysis of the terms sex in scientific literature, but it's not actually providing any systematic review of the actual evidence. It's just giving an opinion piece. So let me actually dive into this. So this is the undergraduate project that the paper was originally based on. So here you can see that they just did a literature review of terms in the scientific literature. So yeah, it's not actually like a scientific, like real empirical study or even a meta-analysis of empirical studies. It is a meta-analysis of how different linguistic terms show up in the literature, but it's not actually like a real scientific study. And if you actually look at the paper that got published, uh, it's based on undergraduate research, and then it's trying to argue that the binary classification is not adequate to account for certain phenomenon. So they say in sexually reproducing species, the common assumption is that there are two sexes strictly classified as female or male. This assertion is supported by the cellular mechanisms of sexual reproduction, in which multiple, usually two, parental gametes combine genotypes to create an offspring with a novel genetic makeup. In animals, these gametes are of different sizes, for example, large ova and small sperm. However, the binary classification of gametic sex breaks down when we consider the broader diversity of gametic phenotypes. For instance, hermaphroditic species possess both gamete types required for reproduction and do not have separate sexes. So, yeah, the example here is like clownfish. Like clownfish are hermaphroditic insofar as a singular individual in the clownfish species can possess both ova and sperm. But here's the thing, like that doesn't happen in mammals. Like in mammals, like you can't be hermaphroditic in that sense insofar as you produce both ova and sperm. It's one or the other. In mammals, you are predisposed to go down a developmental pathway such that your body's organized to produce either ova or sperm under normal circumstances. So the fact that there are other species where there are hermaphrodites doesn't negate the relevant question in regards to humans that sex is a binary, because like when we're talking about sex is a binary, particularly in the context of transgender activism, we are referring to whether or not humans are male or female, or whether there are any other sexes beyond male and female in the human species. And the fact that this is more complicated in non-human, non-mammal species doesn't negate the fact that in mammals and humans, you don't have this hermaphroditic thing. So yeah, of the of the estimated 1.2 million animal species, roughly 5 to 6% are hermaphroditic. That's not true of mammals. That's not true of humans. So it's like irrelevant to the question in transgender activism when we're considering like humans. Okay, and they go on to say operationally, the term sex has two meanings. One, as a reproductive process that refers to the transmission of genetic information to the next generation, and another as a categorical term that encompasses a broad collection of gametic, genetic, hormonal, anatomic, and behavioral traits. Whereas some biologists argue that gametes are the only meaningful sex categories, we find several limitations of this gametic sex definition, particularly for ecologists and evolutionary biologists. First, gametes are rarely measured directly. Okay, so just because like they're difficult to measure or you measure them indirectly doesn't mean that like gametes aren't the fundamental basis for which we understand the differences between males and females, because at the end of the day, like when we're talking about whether sex is a binary, we're talking about ova and sperm, and there's not like a third gamete. There's no third gamete. There's only two types of gametes, large and small, ova and sperm. There's not a third gamete. So like that's why sex is a binary. And even like within these hermaphroditic species, like there are just variations in which the combination of ova or sperm are combined. So you still have a binary difference because there's not like a third gamete that gets mixed into the equation here. So, like, this is why sex is binary, is because there's only two gametes. There's not a third gamete. Okay, and then they go on to say, second, though biologists have drawn a direct connection between the evolution of gamete size and other sexual phenotypes. Okay, so they're saying there is a direct connection between gamete size and other sexual phenotypes, but Ari was trying to say that there is no linked traits. Well, um, what this is saying is like these traits, such as gametes, genotype, hormones, anatomy, behavior, are not universally coupled. Okay, so the fact that they're not universally coupled insofar as they all, 100% have a one-to-one correlation with each other doesn't mean that sex is not a binary. It just means that for the vast majority of cases, like if intersex conditions complicate this such that there could be, for example, a difference in anatomy based on an intersex condition, that doesn't mean there's a third gamete. And also for 99% of humans, like there is a very clear connection between your gamete size and all these other things. And just the fact that they don't like 100% universally couple doesn't mean that in 99% of cases they do couple. So the fact that it's not 100% coupling doesn't mean that it's not 99% coupling. So this idea that like, oh, somehow because there's such things as intersex conditions, that means that, there's more than two sexes. That's like not the case, because like there are, males and females in terms of the gametic definition of two gametes, sperm or ova, and predispositions towards going down a developmental pathway to organize your body around the production of ova and sperm under normal circumstances. But that's the normal circumstances that is the key difference, because in certain environmental or epigenetic or whatever, that normal developmental pathway going down towards the organization of your body towards making sperm or egg, that process can go awry, which is where we have intersex conditions. But that doesn't mean that sex isn't a binary, because you still have you have males who have intersex conditions and you have females who have intersex conditions, but that doesn't cause a problem for the binary like sex model. So this idea that like, oh, just because there's not a 100% universally coupling of all these things, that somehow causes doubts for the binary model. So they say, as a categorical term, sex is often semantically flattened into a binary univariate model, which for individuals are classified as either female or male on a gonochoristic species, and an individual produces one type of gamete throughout its lifespan, like that's humans. A more expansive definition of sex is bimodal, with most individuals falling within one of two peaks of a trait distribution. However, even a bimodal univariate model is an oversimplification, since sex comprises multiple genetic and phenotypic traits with variable distributions. Yeah, so just because like there are like 1% or 2% at maximum cases of intersex conditions, such that you see these, XXY or XX whatever, like androgen insensitivity and all these different like intersex conditions. That doesn't mean that like for the 99% that there's not a clear bimodal distribution, and that's based on the gametic accounts, such as there's males and females. And like they're saying that like, oh well, this like reproductive process is somehow like false, which is the most parsimonious way to define the idea of a sex binary. Is in terms of like, okay, well, how many types of normal developmental pathways can you go down? Can you go down like a sperm path or a ova path? And like, yeah, like in 1% of cases, going down one of those paths can screw up, and that's how you have intersex conditions. That doesn't mean there's like a third path that you could possibly go down for humans where you have some third gamete or something like this. Like, so it's just like not a good argument. So let's go back to the video here.
Not hormones, not chromosomes, not reproductive organs. As many as 1 in 500 people whose biological sex we would say is male actually have two X chromosomes.
Yeah, like I said, like just the fact that there is like not a universal coupling of all these like traits that correspond to male or female. Just because you can be male and have like a small percentage chance of not having a universally coupled like cluster of traits, like just the fact that there can be variation in that cluster doesn't mean that, generally speaking, in the broadest sense of the term, for 99% of the human species, that there's not a clear delineation. And the fact that there's like variation in 1% doesn't mean that there's not a clear and stark contrast in the binary between like the 99% who also fall into whether or not you go down the sperm path or the egg path. So it's just the fact that there can be variation in that process, or that process can go awry, doesn't mean that there's like some third path that you can go down. You're either male or you're female, particularly for humans and particularly for mammals who don't have this hermaphroditic thing. So it's not a good argument.
Chromosomes, for example. Some women are born with an XY chromosome and an otherwise typical female appearance that changes at the onset of puberty. As many as 1.7% of people have traits that we would consider intersex.
Yeah, so even if you have these like conditions, like the vast majority of intersex conditions are still very, very clear about which developmental pathway you like fall on, the male path or the female path. And I think there are some like very, very, very rare intersex conditions where it's not like exactly sure where you fall into the realm of like the going down the male path or the female path. Like there are some complications there, but just the fact that that's true for like the very, very, very rare condition doesn't mean that for the vast majority of intersex conditions, it's not clear, or it's like very clear that you're still on one of the pathways or another, going down the sperm path or the ova path. It's just that that process can go awry to some extent or another. But also for 99% of people, and also for the vast majority of trans people, you still are either male or female, and which is most of the questions of like trans activism around this question of like sex is a binary. Like just because like there are intersex conditions, that doesn't mean that like trans women are somehow like female or something like this. Like you're still male because you fall into the male gamete developmental pathway under normal conditions, and those normal conditions are such that like 99% of people this like doesn't apply to. So it doesn't challenge the idea that sex is a binary,
meaning that they have traits that challenge the notion of a strict binary. Many of the attributes that we think of as male or female can be changed through hormones.
Well, no, because on the most parsimonious, logical, like evolutionary coherent definition of like sex, which is like the ova pathway or the sperm pathway. Like hormones and surgeries like can't change that. So yeah, they can change like the trait clusters or some of the trait clusters, like your hormone levels, like the morphological characteristics of your body, like secondary phenotype, whether you have breasts or a beard or something like this, but that doesn't change the fundamental basis of like which developmental pathway you're on, whether you're on the sperm path or the ova path. And like intersex conditions like also don't like challenge this. So this idea that like, oh, like if I take hormones, I'm like suddenly turning into a female, like that doesn't make sense. Like and just because you cite a undergraduate opinion like literature review, that doesn't like provide like an argument for the fact that like you know this like reproductive process that is about the transmission of genetic information to the next generation through the transmission of sperm or ova and the developmental processes that are based on that process, like that is like what we mean by sex.
Surgeries or simply the recognition of the federal government, which
The recognition of the federal government, are you serious? Like that is a social legal construct that has nothing to do with biology or the sex binary or sperm or ova or like anything objective or biological or grounded in reality. That is a legal fiction. It's not it's not reality.
for now actually recognizes three categories of gender, a concept that, once again, is linked but not interchangeable with biological sex. And in fact, many of the bills restricting gender affirming care in different states include specific carve outs to protect surgeries to alter intersex bodies to fit the binary. It's also worth considering that in the future, more of the traits that make up biological sex will become changeable.
So having like just having the organ of a uterus in your body does not make you a female, even though like females who are on the predisposition to go down the developmental path to organize your body around the production of like ova typically also develop a uterus as a result of that disposition that makes them go down the path to produce ova under normal circumstances. Like yeah, they typically have a uterus, but if you sort of like artificially extract one of these uteruses from females and like stick it inside the body of a male, that doesn't automatically turn the male female. That just means you're a male who has the uterus organ like from a female implanted in your body, but that doesn't change the fact that you went down the developmental pathway under normal circumstances to organize your body around the production of like sperm, which is the most parsimonious, logical, and coherent and scientific definition of what it means to be in the sex binary. So this is like not very convincing.
New techniques are already giving scientists the ability to change chromosomes. Uterine transplants have already been performed successfully, including in women with surgically constructed vaginas. While it may on its face be appealing to reduce the diversity of human experience to basic biology,
It's not basic biology. Like this idea that, oh, like it's simplistic to reduce things to male and female. Well, it's not about simplistic. It's just like observing the world. And when you go out and observe the empirical world, you notice that there's only two types of gametes. Like there's either sperm or ova. There's not a third gamete. There's not a third type of like sex. So like yeah, there's not a third sex. There's like variation, within each sex. And but for 99% of cases it is very simple. And like so this idea that like, oh, you're like if you think sex is a binary, you're somehow basic because like like if you say there's two of something, that's more basic than saying it's like an infinite continuum, when in reality like it's not about basic or not, it's just about what is the best evidence, what model best fits the evidence. And the best model to fit all the evidence about evolution and the evolution of like sperm and ova and like how sperm and ova evolved over millions of years, like that is a like two sex model, like male and female sperm and ova. That's not basic biology. That just is biology. So the idea that, oh, somehow if you graduate to graduate level biology, then you're gonna like, forget the fact that like there's only two gametes, like that's like not really logical.
The truth is much more complicated. That's all for this week. I'll have more next week. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you can see that this was just like poor science masquerading as like advanced biology when it's not advanced biology. It's just like looking. It's like based on a misunderstanding of how intersex complicates the question of like the sex binary, but it doesn't disprove the fact that sex is a binary. So yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.